They swore it wouldn't be Thanksgiving without me. Fly out, Grandma, they'd said, we want you here. So I did. I packed the quilt my own grandmother made, I packed the pecan pie from a recipe older than I am, and I packed every bit of hope I had left in my 78-year-old heart. I flew 2,000 miles. And then, I waited. My name is Maribel Hutchins, and I'm 78 years old. For most of my life, I believed that family was everything. That blood was thicker than water. That if you loved hard enough, sacrificed deep enough, gave until your bones ached, eventually the people you raised would see you. Really see you. Not as a checkbook. Not as a safety net. Not as the woman who shows up when it's convenient and disappears when it's not. But as someone worthy of a chair at the table. A real chair. Not the wobbly one in the corner that gets pulled out only when there's no other option. I learned the hard way that some lessons come wrapped in humiliation so profound, you either break or you become something new entirely. This is the story of how I became new. It started 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. I was sitting in my little bungalow in Tucson, the one I'd bought after Harold passed 7 years ago. The house smelled like cinnamon and old books, the way homes do when they belong to women who've lived long enough to stop apologizing for taking up space. I had my coffee, black with 1 sugar, and I was watching the hummingbirds fight over the feeder outside my kitchen window. The phone rang. I almost didn't answer. My son Grayson, everyone calls him Gray, didn't call often. Maybe once a month if I was lucky. Twice if someone needed money. But I picked up anyway, because hope is a stubborn weed that grows even in the driest soil. Mom. His voice sounded warm, almost cheerful. That should have been my first warning. Hey, I know this is last minute, but Trina and I were talking, and we really want you here for Thanksgiving this year. Like, really want you here. The kids have been asking about you. Kala especially. She keeps saying, when is Grandma Maribel coming? It would mean the world to us if you flew out. I sat there, holding the phone so tight my knuckles went white. Kala was my youngest granddaughter, just turned 9. The last time I'd seen her was 2 Christmases ago, and even then it was a quick visit, awkward and rushed. Gray lived in Minnesota now, in some suburb outside Minneapolis with a name I could never remember. Trina, his wife, was polite but distant. The kind of woman who smiled with her mouth but not her eyes. Are you sure? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. I don't want to impose. I know you've got Trina's family coming, and Gray cut me off. Mom, stop. We want you here. You're not an imposition. You're family. Trina's parents aren't even coming this year. It's just us, the kids, and maybe Trina's brother Lowell. That's it. Small and cozy. The way Thanksgiving should be. Small and cozy. Those words played in my head like a melody. I hadn't had a small, cozy Thanksgiving in years. The last few had been spent at the senior center downtown, eating dry turkey and canned cranberry sauce with other people whose families had forgotten them. Or worse, I'd stayed home alone, microwaving a lean cuisine and pretending it didn't matter. Okay, I said, my heart doing something dangerous in my chest. Something like hope. Okay, I'll come. What day should I fly in? We worked out the details. I'd arrive Wednesday afternoon, the day before Thanksgiving. Gray said he'd pick me up from the airport. Just text me when you land, he said. I'll be there. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing like I was going to meet royalty. I went to the mall and bought new clothes, a soft lavender sweater set that didn't make me look as old as I felt, dark slacks that fit well, and a silk scarf I probably couldn't afford but bought anyway. I wanted to look like someone worth celebrating. Someone who belonged. I baked Kala's favorite cookies, snickerdoodles, and packed them carefully in a tin decorated with snowflakes. I wrapped small gifts for each of the grandkids, Kala, her older brother Jareth, and their teenage sister Naoma. A book for Kala, a gift card for Jareth, and a delicate bracelet for Naoma that I'd seen in a shop window and thought was perfect. I even bought a bottle of expensive wine for Gray and Trina, the kind with a fancy label that people display on their counters. I wanted to show up as a guest, not a burden. As someone who brought something to the table, not someone who took up space at it. The night before my flight, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining what it would be like. Sitting around their dining table, the smell of roasted turkey and stuffing filling the air. Kala climbing into my lap, sticky-fingered and giggling. Naoma showing me pictures on her phone, talking fast the way teenagers do when they're excited. Gray carving the turkey, looking at me across the table with something like pride. Trina pouring wine, maybe even asking me about my life, my hobbies, the things I never got to talk about because no one ever asked. I let myself imagine all of it. I let myself believe it was real. Wednesday morning came cold and clear. I dressed carefully, put on my good earrings, the pearl ones Harold had given me on our 30th anniversary. I checked my bag 3 times to make sure I had everything, gifts, cookies, boarding pass, phone charger, the little notebook I always carried for grocery lists and stray thoughts. My neighbor Oswin drove me to the airport. He was a kind man, widowed like me, and we'd become friends over shared cups of coffee and complaints about the heat. "You excited?" he asked as we pulled up to departures. I smiled, a real one. I am. I really am. The flight was smooth. I had a window seat and watched the desert give way to flatlands, then to the cold gray stretches of the Midwest. I ate the pretzels they gave me and sipped ginger ale, feeling like a woman on an adventure. When the plane touched down in Minneapolis, I felt my stomach flip with nerves and excitement. I texted Gray as soon as we landed, "Just touched down. Baggage claim in 15 minutes. I waited for the little dots that meant he was typing. They never came. That should have been my second warning. But I told myself he was probably driving, or busy with last-minute shopping, or maybe he hadn't seen the message yet. I collected my suitcase and made my way to the arrivals area, scanning the crowd for his face. The terminal was chaos. Families reuniting, children running, couples embracing like they'd been apart for years instead of days. I stood there with my suitcase and my tin of cookies, watching all that joy happen around me like I was behind glass. I checked my phone. No response. I called Gray. It went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I sent another text, "I'm here. At the main arrivals pickup area. Where are you?" 20 minutes passed. Then 40. Then an hour. I sat down on a bench, my suitcase at my feet, and watched the crowd thin out. The families left. The couples left. Even the taxi drivers started looking bored. I called Trina. No answer. I called the house landline, the one Gray had given me years ago, just in case. It rang and rang and rang. I sat there as the sun started to set outside the big airport windows, casting everything in that cold, gray light that makes you feel like you're underwater. My phone buzzed. Finally. But it wasn't a text from Gray. It was a notification from Facebook. Trina had posted something. I opened the app with shaking hands, and there it was. A photo of their dining room table. Beautifully set with autumn-colored placemats, candles, a golden brown turkey in the center surrounded by all the sides. And around that table, faces I recognized. Gray. Trina. The kids. Lowell, Trina's brother. Even Trina's parents, the ones who supposedly weren't coming. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. The caption read, "So grateful for family. Happy Thanksgiving Eve to everyone celebrating with the ones they love. I stared at that photo until my vision blurred. I counted the chairs. 7. Not 8. There was no place for me. There had never been a place for me. And suddenly, sitting there in that airport with my cookies and my gifts and my stupid lavender sweater, I understood. I hadn't been invited. I'd been. What had I been? And what was I going to do now, sitting alone in an airport 1,000 miles from home with nowhere to go? Speech balloon. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Drop a comment below. And if you want to know what Maribel did next, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, this story is just getting started. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the janitors to start pushing their carts through the terminal. Long enough for the announcement voice to switch from the cheerful daytime woman to the tired nighttime man. Long enough for my legs to go numb and my heart to feel like something carved out of stone. I kept staring at that Facebook photo, zooming in on details like a detective looking for clues. The table had 7 settings. 7 cloth napkins folded into perfect triangles. 7 wine glasses catching the candlelight. 7 plates with the good china pattern Trina had registered for when she and Gray got married. I'd bought them 4 place settings as a wedding gift. I wondered if I was eating off my own money. My first instinct was to call Gray again. To demand an explanation. To scream, to cry, to ask what kind of son invites his mother across the country and then leaves her stranded like forgotten luggage. But I didn't. Because somewhere in the fog of my humiliation, a tiny voice whispered something I'd been ignoring for years. This isn't new. You've just been pretending not to see it. I thought about last Christmas, when I'd sent gifts and gotten a group text 3 days later that just said, thanks. I thought about Jarrett's graduation 2 years ago, when I'd offered to fly out and Gray had said, it's probably not worth the trip, Mom. It's just a high school thing. I thought about my 75th birthday, when not one person from my immediate family called until I did. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting. An airport security guard walked by, a young woman with kind eyes and box braids. She paused. You okay, ma'am? Do you need help finding your ride? I shook my head, managing something that probably looked like a smile. No, thank you. Just, got my signals crossed. I'll figure it out. She nodded but didn't quite believe me. I could tell by the way her eyes lingered. She'd probably seen 100 versions of me, people who'd been left behind, forgotten, dismissed. She walked away, and I was grateful she didn't push. I couldn't have handled kindness right then. It would have cracked me wide open. I pulled my suitcase toward the exit, the wheels squeaking against the polished floor. I had no plan. No hotel reservation. No rental car. I'd assumed I'd be staying at Gray's house, in whatever guest room Trina kept Pinterest perfect for visitors who actually got invited. Outside, the Minnesota cold hit me like a slap. It was the kind of cold that makes your lungs hurt, that sneaks under your coat and finds every gap in your clothing. Tucson didn't prepare you for this. Nothing prepared you for this. I stood under the fluorescent overhang of the passenger pickup area, watching cars come and go, families loading luggage and laughing. I was invisible. Completely, utterly invisible. There was a diner across the parking lot. One of those 24-hour places with neon signs promising comfort food and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I'd passed it on my way in, barely noticed it then. Now it looked like a lighthouse. I wheeled my suitcase across 2 lanes of slow-moving traffic, ignoring the honks and the cold air burning my throat. The diner was called Ruthie's. The sign had a cartoon waitress with a bright smile holding a steaming pie. The door chimed when I walked in, and the warmth wrapped around me like an apology. Only a handful of people sat scattered in the red vinyl booths. A trucker at the counter. A young couple sharing French fries. An older man doing a crossword puzzle in the back corner. The waitress looked up from behind the counter. She was maybe 60, with silver hair cut short and practical, and a face that suggested she'd heard every hard luck story there was. "Sit anywhere, honey," she called out. Her voice had that particular kindness that people who've worked service jobs their whole lives develop, the kind that doesn't judge, doesn't pry, just makes space. I chose a booth by the window where I could see the parking lot and, beyond it, the airport terminal glowing against the dark sky. I set my purse on the seat next to me and stared at the laminated menu without really seeing it. The waitress appeared with a coffee pot. "You look like you've had a day," she said gently, pouring without asking. "I'm Cassidy. What can I get you?" I opened my mouth to say I wasn't hungry, but what came out was, "What kind of pie do you have?" Cassidy's face softened into a smile. "Oh, honey. It's your lucky night. We've got pumpkin, apple, cherry, and chocolate cream. But between you and me," she leaned in conspiratorially, "the pumpkin is fresh. Made it myself this afternoon." "I'll take the pumpkin," I said. "With whipped cream if you have it." "We absolutely have it. You want coffee with that or something stronger?" "I can't officially serve you bourbon, but I can officially look the other way if you brought your own." She winked. Despite everything, I almost smiled. "Coffee's fine." Cassidy brought the pie 5 minutes later. It was enormous, a thick wedge with a mountain of whipped cream on top, and she'd sprinkled cinnamon over everything. She set it down with a fork and a napkin and patted my shoulder, "Just once, just enough. You eat that slow," she said. "Pie like this deserves respect." I picked up my fork and cut through the tip. The filling was perfect, smooth and spiced just right, the crust flaky and buttery. I put the bite in my mouth and suddenly, without warning, I was crying. Not sobbing. Just silent tears running down my face while I chewed and swallowed and took another bite. I cried and ate pie, and nobody bothered me. Cassidy refilled my coffee twice without comment. The trucker left. The couple left. The crossword man fell asleep with his head on his arms. And I sat there in that fluorescent-lit diner at 10 o'clock on Thanksgiving Eve, eating pie I'd bought for myself, with money I'd earned, in a city where nobody wanted me. And it was the best pie I'd ever tasted. Because it was mine. Nobody asked me to share it. Nobody took a bite off my plate without asking. Nobody told me I'd had enough or that I was being indulgent. It was just me and this perfect slice of pie, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I wasn't performing. I wasn't trying to earn love or prove my worth or make myself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. I was just a woman eating pie. And maybe that sounds pathetic. Maybe it sounds sad. But sitting there, with whipped cream on my fork and salt tracks drying on my face, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly. But something close to peace. When I finished, I sat back and looked out at the dark parking lot. My phone was on the table, face down. I hadn't checked it since seeing that Facebook photo. I didn't want to. Because I knew what would happen. Eventually Gray would realize I'd actually shown up. Eventually there would be texts, explanations, apologies that weren't really apologies. Sorry, we got our wires crossed, or, I thought you were coming tomorrow, or, Trina thought I was picking you up and I thought she was. The lies people tell when they're caught being cruel. I didn't want to hear them yet. Not tonight. Tonight I wanted to sit with this moment. This slice of pie. This tiny declaration of independence I hadn't even known I was making. Cassidy came by with the check. I expected it to be $7, maybe $8. It was $4.50. I left a 20 on the table. That's too much, honey, Cassidy said when she picked it up. No, I told her, looking her right in the eyes. It's exactly right. Thank you for the pie. And for not asking questions. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. You need a place to stay tonight? There's a motel 2 blocks down. Clean sheets, no bedbugs, and the manager owes me a favor. I can call ahead. I felt my throat tighten. That would be, thank you. Yes. She pulled out her phone right there and made the call. 2 minutes later it was settled. Room 12. He's holding it under my name. You just show up and tell him Cassidy sent you. $45 a night, cash or card. I stood up, pulled on my coat, and wheeled my suitcase toward the door. Cassidy called after me. Hey. I turned. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. If you're still in town and you've got nowhere to be, we're open all day. Turkey dinner with all the fixings, 12 to 8. On the house for folks who need it. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Outside, the cold felt different. Still brutal, still sharp, but somehow more manageable. I walked the 2 blocks to the Evergreen Motel, a squat little building with green doors and a flickering vacancy sign. The manager was exactly as Cassidy had promised, efficient, incurious, kind. He handed me a key attached to a plastic diamond keychain and pointed toward the room. Vending machines are by the office. Ice machine's broken, but I can bring you some if you need it. Room 12 was small and tired but clean. A double bed with a sunflower bedspread, a TV bolted to the dresser, a bathroom with a shower stall and miniature toiletries. I set my suitcase down and sat on the edge of the bed. The springs creaked. I pulled out my phone, finally, and looked at the screen. 17 missed calls from Gray. 23 texts. The first few were casual. Hey mom, where are you? Then concerned, Mom, are you okay? Did you miss your flight? Then panicked, Mom, please call me. Then angry, this isn't funny. Why aren't you answering? And finally, the last one, sent 20 minutes ago, if you're trying to make some kind of point, this is really manipulative. I read that last text 3 times. Manipulative. I started typing a response. Then deleted it. Started again. Deleted again. What could I possibly say? That I'd flown across the country because he'd invited me, then arrived to find I'd been forgotten? That I'd seen their perfect family Thanksgiving photo, the one with no chair for me? That I was sitting in a $45 motel room wondering when exactly I'd become optional in my own son's life? None of those words would change anything. They'd just give him ammunition. Proof that I was dramatic, oversensitive, difficult. Proof that they were right not to include me. So instead, I typed 5 words and hit send. I'm fine. Don't worry. Good night. Then I turned off my phone. I showered in water that ran lukewarm, dried off with the thin motel towel, and put on my nightgown. I got into bed and pulled the covers up to my chin. The room smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet, and the heater rattled under the window, but I was warm. I was safe. And I was alone by choice, not abandonment. That distinction mattered. I lay there in the dark, listening to cars pass on the street outside, and I thought about that pie. About Cassidy's kindness. About the way she'd looked at me and seen someone worth caring for, even though we were strangers. About the way that one slice of pie had meant more than 100 fancy family dinners where I'd sat at the end of the table picking at my food and pretending everything was fine. I thought about tomorrow. Thanksgiving Day. A day I was supposed to spend with my family, being grateful for togetherness and love and all the things that were supposed to matter. Instead I'd be, where? Here. At Ruthie's diner eating turkey with strangers? On a plane back to Tucson? The truth was, I didn't know. But lying there in that small, clean room, I realized something. For the first time in years, the choice was mine. Not Gray's. Not Trina's. Mine. And maybe that was the most terrifying thing of all. But what choice would I make? And more importantly, what would I say when Gray inevitably showed up looking for me? Speech balloon. If you've ever had to choose yourself over family expectations, comment PIE below. You're not alone. And if you're hooked on Maribel's story, smash that like button and subscribe. It's going to blow your mind. See you there. I woke to thin gray light seeping through the motel curtains and the sound of a garbage truck grinding its way down the street. For one beautiful, blank moment, I forgot where I was. Then it all came rushing back, the airport, the photo, the pie, the motel, and my chest tightened like someone was sitting on it. I lay there staring at the water-stained ceiling tiles, trying to decide if I regretted coming. The honest answer was complicated. Yes, I regretted the humiliation. The cold. The waiting. But no, I didn't regret finally seeing the truth. There's a difference between suspecting you're not wanted and having it confirmed with 7 place settings and a Facebook caption about loving family. The second one hurts more but lies less. My phone sat on the nightstand, still powered off. I reached for it, then pulled my hand back. Not yet. First, I needed to think clearly, without the static of other people's explanations cluttering my head. I got up, used the bathroom, and washed my face with the tiny bar of soap the motel provided. My reflection looked older than I remembered. When had the lines around my mouth gotten so deep? When had my eyes started looking so tired? I put on my clothes from yesterday, the lavender sweater that was supposed to make me look like someone worth celebrating, and braided my hair the way I'd worn it for 40 years. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the small notebook I always carried. I'd started keeping this notebook after Harold died. At first it was just grocery lists and doctor's appointments, practical things to help me remember what my grief-fogged brain kept forgetting. But over time it became something else. A place for thoughts I couldn't say out loud. Questions I couldn't ask. The truth I couldn't face. I flipped past pages of recipes and phone numbers until I found a blank one, and then I started writing. Not about yesterday. Not about Gray or Trina or the airport. Instead, I made a list. A list of every time in the past 5 years that I'd felt like an afterthought. Like something tolerated rather than treasured. I wrote quickly, my hand cramping, not censoring myself. The list filled 2 pages. Then 3. Then 4. Gray's 50th birthday party, found out about it on Facebook 3 days after it happened. Mother's Day 2 years ago, got a text at 9 p.m. that said, "Happy Mother's Day, sorry busy day." When I offered to help pay for Naoma's braces, thanked via email, not even a phone call. Last Christmas, sent gifts, got a group text. Jarrett's graduation, told not to come because it wasn't worth the trip. My 75th birthday, no calls until I called them first. Emergency gallbladder surgery, told them I was in the hospital. Gray said he'd try to visit, if he could get away from work. Never did. The list went on. And on. Reading it back felt like drowning. Each item alone was forgivable. Explainable. People get busy. Life gets complicated. But together, they formed a pattern. A clear, undeniable pattern of a woman who mattered only when it was convenient. I closed the notebook and sat there, feeling the weight of all those small dismissals settle in my bones. The heater rattled. Someone in the next room was watching the Thanksgiving Day parade on TV. I could hear the tinny sound of marching bands and announcers' enthusiastic voices. Normal people were waking up excited about turkey and football and family. And I was sitting in a motel room holding a notebook full of evidence that I'd been fooling myself for years. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since the pie last night, and it was almost 9 in the morning. I thought about Cassidy's offer, Ruthie's diner, turkey dinner, on the house for folks who needed it. But I wasn't ready to be around people yet. Not even kind strangers. Instead, I pulled on my coat and walked out into the cold morning. The motel was on a sad little strip of road with a gas station, a Dollar General, and a laundromat. I went to the Dollar General and bought a protein bar, a bottle of orange juice, and a cheap pay-as-you-go phone charger because mine was still packed in my suitcase and I couldn't face digging through my things right now. The cashier was a teenager with acne and dead eyes who scanned my items without looking at me. Outside, I sat on a bench near the parking lot and ate my protein bar slowly, washing it down with orange juice that tasted like chemicals and nostalgia. It was the kind of juice we used to buy when Gray was little, when we were young and broke and happy. I thought about those days. About the tiny apartment we'd lived in when he was a baby, where the rent was $300 and the heat barely worked. I'd sewn curtains from bed sheets and made soup stretch for 3 days. Harold worked double shifts at the printing plant, and I took in mending to make extra money. We were exhausted and anxious and constantly worried about money, but we were together. And Gray, God, Gray was such a sweet child. He'd follow me around the apartment chattering about everything and nothing, helping me fold laundry by making deliberate messes, drawing pictures he'd taped to the refrigerator. When had that boy disappeared? When had he turned into a man who could invite his mother across the country and then forget she existed? I finished my juice and threw the bottle in the trash. My hands were shaking, but not from cold. From anger. That's what I finally recognized it as. Not hurt, not sadness, but pure, clean anger. I'd spent so much of my life swallowing anger, pushing it down, telling myself it wasn't ladylike or useful or fair. But sitting there on that bench outside a Dollar General on Thanksgiving morning, I let myself feel it. I was angry. Furious, actually. At Gray for inviting me and then abandoning me. At Trina for that smug Facebook post. At myself for believing that this time would be different. At Harold for dying and leaving me alone to navigate this mess. At everyone who'd ever made me feel like I was too much or not enough or just wrong somehow. The anger felt good. Sharp and clarifying. It burned away the fog of self-doubt and left something solid behind. I pulled out my phone and turned it on. It took a moment to boot up, and then the notifications started flooding in. 42 missed calls. 67 texts. 3 voicemails. I scrolled through them without opening most of them. Gray's messages had evolved overnight. The manipulative accusation from last night had given way to genuine panic. Mom, where the hell are you? We're about to call the police. Then Trina, Maribel, this is concerning. Gray is beside himself. Please let us know you're safe. Then Naoma, Grandma? Where are you? Dad is freaking out. And finally, Gray again, sent just 20 minutes ago, Mom, I'm coming to look for you. I'm driving to the airport right now. Please tell me where you are. I stared at that last message. He was coming to find me. Not because he'd realized what he'd done. Not because he was sorry. But because my absence was causing him inconvenience. Because my silence was disrupting his perfect Thanksgiving. I could picture him driving, probably speeding, probably blaming me in his head for being dramatic. Probably already crafting the story he'd tell Trina about how his mother was difficult and unpredictable and this was just typical behavior. The thought made my anger spike into something hotter. I opened my text messages and typed, I'm fine. I'm safe. I'm at the Evergreen Motel on Highway 61. Room 12. But Gray, I want you to think very carefully before you come here. Think about why I'm in a motel instead of your house. Think about what you promised me and what you actually delivered. I'll be here until noon. After that, I'm checking out and going home. I hit send before I could second guess myself. The reply came within seconds, on my way. 20 minutes. I walked back to my room and sat on the bed, waiting. I didn't unpack. Didn't turn on the TV. Just sat there with my hands folded in my lap like I was waiting for a doctor to deliver bad news. Because in a way, I was. I was waiting to see if my son was capable of understanding what he'd done. If he was capable of genuine remorse. Or if he'd show up with excuses and justifications and make this somehow my fault. 18 minutes later, I heard a car door slam. Then urgent knocking. Mom. Mom, it's me. Open up. I stood slowly and opened the door. Gray looked terrible. His hair was uncombed, he was wearing sweatpants and a Vikings hoodie, and his eyes were red-rimmed. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Jesus Christ, Mom. What are you doing here? He stepped inside without being invited, looking around the small room like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Do you have any idea how worried I've been? Why didn't you answer your phone? Why didn't you tell me you were? Because you left me at the airport, I said quietly. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. Gray froze. His mouth opened, then closed. What? No. Mom, there was a miscommunication. You thought what, Gray? That I was arriving today? On Thanksgiving? When you specifically told me to come Wednesday so we could spend the holiday together? I pulled out my phone and showed him our text exchange from 3 weeks ago. The dates. The times. The explicit plan we'd made. You invited me. You said the family wanted me there. You said Kala was asking for me. He looked at the texts, and I watched the color drain from his face. Fuck. Mom, I forgot. I completely forgot. We had Trina's family coming and the house was chaos and I forgot you were coming. You forgot. I repeated it like I was tasting the words. You forgot your 78-year-old mother was flying across the country to spend Thanksgiving with you. You forgot even though I texted you when I landed. Even though I called you 6 times. Even though I waited at that airport for over an hour while you and Trina and the kids sat down to your perfect family dinner. Gray ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from when he was a child and knew he was in trouble. Mom, I'm so sorry. I am. This is completely my fault. But why didn't you just call a cab and come to the house? Why did you, stay at the airport all night? Come to this motel? Why didn't you? Because I saw the photo, Gray. My voice was still quiet, but now it had an edge. Trina's Facebook post. The one with your beautiful Thanksgiving table. The one where I counted 7 place settings. 7 chairs. 7 people. And not one of them was me. You didn't forget I was coming. You just forgot to tell me not to. The silence that followed was so heavy I could feel it pressing against my skin. Gray opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. That's not. Mom, that's not fair. We didn't deliberately exclude you. It was a mistake. A horrible, stupid mistake, and I take full responsibility, but you're acting like we did this on purpose. Did you set a place for me? I asked. He blinked. What? Last night. When you realized I hadn't shown up. When you sat down for dinner. Did you set a place for me? Did anyone say, where's Mom? Where's Grandma Maribel? Should we wait? Or did you just eat your turkey and post your picture and go on with your evening? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I could see it in his face, the guilt, yes, but also the defensiveness. The part of him that wanted to argue that I was being unfair, that I was twisting things, that he was the victim here for having to deal with my dramatics on Thanksgiving morning. I knew that look. I'd seen it before, in smaller moments. Moments I'd ignored because it was easier than facing what they meant. Mom, he said finally, his voice taking on that careful, patronizing tone people use when they're trying to calm down someone they think is being irrational. I understand you're upset. And you have every right to be. But can we talk about this at the house? Trina feels terrible. The kids want to see you. We can still have Thanksgiving together. It's not too late to fix this. But was it? And more importantly, did I even want it fixed? Speech balloon. What would you do in Maribel's position? Would you go to Gray's house or walk away? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're on Team Maribel, subscribe right now. I looked at my son standing in that cramped motel room, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I saw him clearly. Not through the soft focus lens of maternal love or the desperate that he'd somehow transformed back into the sweet boy who used to hold my hand. I saw him as he was, a 47-year-old man who'd learned that his mother's feelings were negotiable. That her time didn't matter. That apologies could substitute for actual change. And I realized that going to his house, sitting at that table, pretending everything was fine, it wouldn't fix anything. It would just teach him that he could hurt me without consequence. No, I said. The word came out steady and final. Gray's eyebrows shot up. No. No, Gray. I'm not coming to your house. I'm not sitting at your table pretending this is just a silly misunderstanding. I'm not making this easy for you. His face shifted through several expressions: confusion, frustration, and finally something that looked almost like fear. Mom, come on. Don't be like this. I said I was sorry. What more do you want? What did I want? That was the question, wasn't it? I'd spent 78 years trying to figure out what other people wanted from me and contorting myself to provide it. What did I want? I want you to tell me the truth, I said quietly. Not the polite version. Not the explanation that makes you feel better. The real truth. Did you actually forget I was coming? Or did you just hope I wouldn't show up? The color drained from Gray's face again. That's... Jesus, Mom, that's a terrible thing to say. Of course I didn't hope you wouldn't show up. I invited you, didn't I? Did you? Or did Kala ask about me, and you felt guilty enough to make the call? Did Trina know I was coming yesterday? Did the kids? He was quiet for a long moment. Too long. Trina knew, he said finally. I told her last week. And what did she say? He ran his hand through his hair again. She said it would be tight with her parents and Lowell there, but we'd make it work. Her parents. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The ones who supposedly weren't coming this year. The ones you specifically mentioned as a reason why there'd be room for me. Gray's jaw tightened. They changed their minds at the last minute. Decided to drive up from Iowa. That's why things got chaotic and why you forgot about me. I finished his sentence. Trina's parents showed up and suddenly there wasn't room for your mother. Is that the real story, Gray? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my heart crack. Resentment. My son resented me. Not for anything I'd done in the past 24 hours, but for existing. For being an obligation he had to manage. For being the kind of mother who actually wanted to see her family. You want the truth? His voice had an edge now. The careful, apologetic tone was gone. Fine. Yes, things got complicated when Trina's parents decided to come. Yes, it made the logistics harder. And yes, in the chaos of trying to get everything ready, I forgot to pick you up. But Mom, you could have called a cab. You could have shown up at the house anyway. Instead you disappeared to some motel and made everyone panic and turned this into a huge dramatic thing. That's what you do. You make everything about you and your feelings and how nobody appreciates you enough. The words hit me like slaps. Not because they were surprising, but because they were finally out loud. This was what my son thought of me. What he'd maybe always thought of me, underneath the